Will Jerome Powell moon your bags? If you're an XRP or a Bitcoin holder, you can't miss this video coming to you from 6th Street in Austin, Texas. Jerome Powell has held interest rates too high for too long. Now you're like, wait a minute, Bill, I thought you said this was gonna help crypto and help my bags, and it is. You just wanna stay tuned for all of these nuances that the institutions understand, but retail is just now seeing. Jerome Powell has kept interest rates high because when banks deposit money at the Fed pays them interest. It's like welfare for banks, literally. So the higher the rates, the more money they can dole out to banks, which frankly have unrealized losses on their books. Now this has gone on for long enough, right? Powell is taking a lot of heat and his legacy is in jeopardy, right? His legacy is a guy who screwed up on inflation and now he doesn't want to leave his post because somebody's making him leave his post. But just wait, there's a lot more on what Powell's gonna do. Powell can do one of two things. He can start lowering rates, and the first time he does it, he admits two things. One, obviously, rates are way too high. Sorry I didn't do this earlier. The second thing he could be admitting is there could be a problem out there with financial institutions. Maybe somebody was short equities and it exploded in their face. Maybe banks have unrealized losses from the tightening cycle that still haven't come home to roost. So Powell cutting rates could be an indication of further problems in legacy, which of course helps crypto in the new era. Now, there's also the idea that Powell could just, right? In other words, if Jerome Powell quits, right, then that sets up his successor who's gonna cut rates by 300 basis points because that's what the orange man wants. He wants rates 300 basis points lower. Do you know where Bitcoin is if they have to cut rates from 4% to 1%? I mean, that's like 350K. That's XRP at $6. Like easily, right? Because, honestly, it's gonna put money in people's hands, right? Less credit card interest. It's gonna make home buying at least slightly more affordable, and most especially, it's gonna make your XRP bag fly higher, as well as your Bitcoin bag or whatever altcoin bag you do, because as soon as Powell cuts rates or quits, it's actually the start of a new speculative cycle, which is, really funny because, equities are back making all-time highs after crashing, and crypto is only starting. And Jerome Powell, either by cutting rates or quitting, can add more fuel to the crypto fire. And there's plenty of reasons why he would lower rates, right? Which is another thing you really need to stand by and listen to. Amazon Prime Day was a complete flop. There is no growth in the job market. There's two job markets. The job for people who have jobs, they're okay, right? There's no imminent layoff at their company, they're good. But if you get laid off, you're gonna be unemployed for a while. This is the primary reason why the Fed needs to cut rates, is because there's no job growth. And you have mass layoffs in government and the tech sector. They're not taking that part of their mandate seriously enough. So what are people gonna do that have jobs, that have a little money? What are they gonna do? They're gonna massively FOMO into crypto. How do you protect yourself from, say, a world that gets wacky, your job gets replaced, your interest rates are too high, sovereigns don't care about it? It's easy. You buy crypto. You got crypto, you buy more crypto. Because not only are you thinking that, but BlackRock is thinking that. Crypto hedge funds are thinking that. Fidelity, mutual fund houses. You don't know what that is? No problem. If you have a 401k at work, the guys who run those 401ks do not have enough money invested in crypto. Right? They have, it's like, 80, 90% of the money in stocks and 2% of the money in crypto. And people don't realize that if Powell starts cutting rates for the purposes of saving the little guy, that the big guys will start coming in and buying massive amounts of crypto. Massive. Like there is $60 trillion in global pension funds alone. You get like 1 or 2% of that in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is at 275. And you just witnessed what happens when you get kind of an all of a sudden, buy it at the market type of move in Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin went from 107 to 118 on a line. What happens if $60 trillion, of capital starts coming into crypto looking for a home, right? You can have those guys selling stocks that are overvalued and already made all-time highs and pouring into the crypto universe. And of course, what would be the signal for them to get busy on that outside the Bitcoin breakout would be the Federal Reserve or Jerome Powell cutting rates, right? And saying, okay, yeah, you're right, I screwed this up. Because the way I think it's going to work out, especially for like XRP holders, is you got to start using your imagination to get more and more bullish. Like, what's the most bullish thing that could come from the Fed? Easy, that he cuts rates once and then quits. This way, after he cuts rates once, the orange man can say, thank you very much for cutting rates. Thank you very much for serving your country. Now I'm going to put some guy in there who's going to basically do what I tell him to do. And if you doubt that's going to happen, this little law enforcement issue with the files, the orange man rearranged that after promising to release it. Like, he gets what he wants, whether anybody likes it or not. If he wants rates down 300 basis points, rates are going 300 basis points lower. And I actually think the stock market is starting to price that in, and so is crypto to a certain degree, but not in altcoins. So again, how is Jerome Powell mooning your bags? Jerome Powell is mooning your bags by becoming early on massive rate cuts, right? In other words, when the Fed starts cutting, they don't just do, once they have a reason to cut the first time, they probably have a reason to cut 5 more times, which is not reflected in crypto prices. And the great news is, well, crypto's like what, 10% off the bottom? Crypto's still like 50, 60, 70% off its election high. And now you have an even better case, because back then it was like, well, I expect the government to moon my bags. I expect them to put my coin in the strategic reserve. Well, now you don't need the strategic reserve because you got such bad behavior on the part of sovereigns. You got bad debt problems, bad spending problems, right? You have ETFs in the financial front. So the second Powell cuts rates, he admits he's been wrong. He's been wrong about all of that. And then when you consider that in the context of all of these mistakes that sovereigns are making, you have a case for what crypto was made for, an off-ramp to the system, a way out. So, ironically, Satoshi Nakamoto and Jerome Powell have something in common. They're both telling you that now is the time, that governments have screwed up. He has screwed up. He let inflation get out of control. He left rates at 0 because he was most likely favorable to the administration that was in office. He's leaving rates at 4% with this tariff excuse because he probably doesn't like the current administration. Everybody thinks the Fed is not political. That is completely wrong. And it favors crypto because the more trouble the current administration gets in with optics, law enforcement, tariffs, general, men behaving badly, the harder they're going to have to pivot to crypto. The more they're going to need those rate cuts. Right? Even if they have to force Powell out or do something crazy like appoint a Fed chairman in waiting. So Jerome Powell is going to moon your bags whether he cuts rates or he just sits there and is stubborn, because it's a countdown to the realization that A, they don't know what they're doing, B, that rates are too high, and C, and most important of all, that crypto is too cheap. It's too low. They're like, wow, Bill, but it's been up like the last 2 or 3 days. Yeah, but man, XRP was up 10% in one day. So what? The last time XRP went up, it went up 400%. Or you're like, well, I can't buy it. And that's what the bear market has taught you. The bear market has taught you, oh, well, it's up 2 days in a row. I can't touch this. Jerome Powell is going to fix all that. There's one other thing you need to realize, and this is very important, so stay tuned. There is 2 ways the Fed can get involved. 1, it can cut rates. And 2, it can talk about cutting rates. In other words, there hasn't really been much talk of that. There's all this talk about why rates need to stay the same, tariffs, blah, 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 blah. They start to talk, the word is dovish. Powell starts to talk dovish, which may have already started in the mind of the equity market. Powell starts to talk dovish. You could have a rocket ship move higher in altcoins, because again, altcoins can get hurt by higher interest rates. Highly speculative instruments are highly sensitive to what goes on with interest rates. Interest rates start going down, or you get sort of a go signal on speculation from rates going down. The suppression of altcoins all of a sudden ends. The suppression of your XRP, your Solana, your meme, whatever. All that suppression ends all at once. Now, you saw it happen in Bitcoin, and now what you got to realize is when Powell gets involved, because Bitcoin may be anticipating that, when Powell gets involved, you can have dramatic upside. Remember, the last cycle was about what the Fed had to print in 1 month when they shut the economy down for cough, cold, and flu. Global central banks printed $14 trillion in 1 month. And of course, that led to a massive crypto upcycle. In this particular case, what's going to lead to a massive crypto upcycle is insane government spending, right? Because they got to borrow and borrow and borrow, then put all that money in circulation, right? That's the key thing, right? This borrowed money doesn't just sit around. They put it in circulation. And that's juice for the economy. That's juice for speculative assets. So this is only the beginning.